Hi, everyone, and welcome to this wonderful new panel called Trust is a New Normal. And I'm very excited to have with me Ryan Rugg from R3. Say hi, Ryan.
Nice to meet everyone.
And Madeline Bailey from Ballantyne Consultancy and previously at Amis Allen. Say hi.
Hi.
Christoph Radici from Rexio. Say hi.
Hey, guys.
And last but not least, Jack Prescott from MTech Capital.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Guys, I propose we kick it off straight away. And Madeline, no pressure, but could you explain to us what is trust in the insurance industry? And also, what does a policy actually mean?
Thanks, Walid. It's a really, really great question. And I think when most people think about insurance, you're probably thinking about your motor insurance or your home insurance. But actually, insurance is a very, very complex and sophisticated class of financial products. Ultimately, when I think of trust within insurance, I'm thinking about an insurance company's promise to pay when a policyholder suffers a loss. And of course, when we think around the broader insurance market, you've got personal lines insurance. So that's, again, your homes, your cars, etc. And you're moving into much more.
We've lost you there, Madeline. Until Madeline. Oh, there you go.
Oh, there you go. Did I cut you off for a bit?
Yes, you were talking about personal lines.
Is it me? I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Insurance. It's because it's insurance. It's cursed me. And I think my point I want to make really is that the point of insurance is to spread concentrated risk. So the industry is built around products that really serve society by spreading risk and therefore helping to manage concentrated risk exposures. And so trust really means paying out in wherever you are in the spectrum of insurance when you suffer a loss.
Excellent. And I'm curious to get your insights in terms of how does trust change between the perspective of a consumer and an insurer, reinsurer, or even an enterprise? Or is it fundamentally still the same thing, would you say?
Well, I think it's fundamentally the same thing. I think the more sophisticated buyers will have much more sophisticated products. And so I think that they are structured in more complex ways. But ultimately, you're looking for a payout for an insured event when you suffer a loss.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Now, Jack, could you tell us, two words, on MTech Capital, but also, from your perspective, how does the insurance sector look and deal with trust? Because you have views on the insurtech community, but also insurance in general.
Yeah, so we're an insurance tech-focused venture capital fund. So we invest in early-stage technology companies in this industry, and what we've seen a lot from both our portfolios, companies and companies that we interact with, is that they are trying to solve issues of trust in the insurance industry in a few different ways. One of the ones that's probably most critical and has come to light most recently is what happens in the event of what you think should be a claim that doesn't actually pay out, to go back to Madeline's point. For example, COVID-19, there's been a lot of issues with businesses covered under businesses having business interruption policies that cover them in the event of, their store being broken into, being flooded, et cetera, et cetera. And they haven't been covered for COVID-19, and lots of small businesses have class action lawsuits against their insurers. Hiscox in particular has suffered from this. And I think that's really interesting to look at how insurtech companies are responding to that and to that lack of trust in the established players in the market. And I think one of the things that we've seen from a technology perspective is the rise of parametric insurance products that seek to find an external reference point that determines the payout ahead of time. And so you kind of remove the trust from the equation by saying, if your property floods and the water reaches this level, then we pay no matter what, and we don't go through the process of assessing the claim, seeing how much we lost. It's a pure linear relationship. So I think that's one of the ways we've seen where people are responding from early stage companies are responding to what they see as problems of trust in the insurance industry.
And do you believe there's an opportunity for the venture capitalist industry and investors in general to use trust as a criteria for investing in insurtech? So basically, how likely is an insurtech here to abide by certain trust and perhaps transparency values?
Yeah, so I think it's consumer attitudes towards incumbent insurance companies are generally quite negative. And so there isn't a lot. In some industries, you're really trying to overcome a barrier where there's a trusted incumbent and people aren't willing to bet on an early stage company with, they're not willing to write a policy with them. In insurance, that's all potentially less true because the attitudes towards the incumbent providers isn't very good. And so people are willing to experiment with what they see as being a more digital, more transparent option. And that is really what a lot of the successful insurtech companies have led with. And the IPO of companies like Lemonade has really been an endorsement of that. They are very focused on transparency in the claims process, and even in the way that they underwrite, in a way that other insurance companies haven't. And so there's this gap that has emerged from the lack of trust in the incumbents that insurtechs are kind of rushed to fill.
Excellent. Now, Ryan, if you could tell us, a few words, about R3, but also tell us, from your perspective, how can technology, facilitate or be an enabler of trust?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Wally. So, R3 is an enterprise blockchain company. We started back in 2015 as originally a consortium of different banks and insurers that were working together on, blockchain solutions. Then in 2017, we released our platform called Corda. We have an open source version and an enterprise version. And really the reason, our CTO jokes it would have been a lot cheaper and easier just to, use one of the other protocols out there. But due to privacy and scalability, there was none of them that were really fit for purpose based on our ecosystem's kind of requirements. And trust was one of it, right? And privacy was kind of key. So, within InsurTechs in 2017, Wally, as you know, we opened the Center of Excellence for Insurers and Reinsurers with the board. And we really saw a massive kind of adoption and migration from other platforms. And it's really because, in what we want to call a trustless society, it's privacy is so key. And sharing data with untrusted parties was in an emerging tech was new to them. So, kind of evolving on that. But I think that the, enabling technology to kind of help bring back that trust and break down those silos has been really powerful for a lot of insurers.
Thank you. Now, Christoph, if you could tell us, 2 words on Rexio, but also tell us from an insurtech point of view, are you addressing perhaps the lack of trust that the incumbents have been penalized during this pandemic area, and how are you doing it?
Yeah, so Rexio is a platform that has this one ultimate aim to bring trust to people who didn't have that platform for remote interactions prior to Rexio being introduced. Trust was typically confined to either your company infrastructure, your IT infrastructure, or your physical proximity and people who you interact with. The recent situation globally has changed the entire perception of trust. We were suddenly confined to our four walls. We had to stay at home. We had to find new ways to interact in a trustworthy way with people all over the globe. And we believe we found a solution that is exactly doing that. So Rexio basically extends trust beyond your infrastructure, beyond your four walls, beyond your physical proximity. We think that we call it a blanket of trust for data and for interactions with people, businesses together.
Great, thank you for that. Sorry, I was pressing the mute button and not on mute too many times. So my question to all of you is that trust is based on, I would say, 3 principles. And I'd like to get your view as a panel on how well does the insurance industry do on each of them. And one of those principles is you need to have a solution to a customer problem. As you know, the insurance industry has been plagued by and accused of being not very customer-centric. The second element is you need to fulfill the promise of solving that problem. And the third is you need to deliver that solution in an honest and transparent manner. how well does the insurance industry do on all three?
I'll kick off with an example of a project where those were the kind of issues we were trying to answer, if that's helpful. I think Ryan will be able to jump in because she'll be familiar with it. So in the marine insurance space at MS Amlin, we collaborated with a number of other brokers and insurers with Maersk, the global shipping company, to help them look at how they could use blockchain in particular, but a digital solution to help it manage the exposure of all the ships that it owns and manages that transport goods around the world. One of the kind of talking points that we always spoke about was we wanted to bring the risk closer to the capital that was underwriting the risk. And in commercial insurance, you'll often hear people say, well, 40% of my premium, which is the money you pay for your insurance policy to buy the product, 40% of what I'm paying is not even bearing on the risk. And so what Maersk did was they pulled out their main program, their whole program, which is the insurance program that protects all those ships, and they took it to a different insurer and a different broker with a digital program wrapped around that. It was blockchain based, whereby they could digitize all that risk and asset data and have a real-time view of the exposure of every single vessel in its fleet. So to my mind, it is a really good example, it's still ongoing, of working with a very sophisticated insurance buyer and working to solve the problem directly with them rather than just treating them as something at the end of a payment.
Yeah.
I also think that when we are talking about interactions between normal people and insurance companies, we have had this perception of stronger partner enforcing their vision of trust, their perception of trust onto the weaker one. What they believed was trustworthy was in fact so, and you were the one who had to prove otherwise. If we can now move away from that model and we introduce a trustless ecosystem where parties do not have to start with a form of trust relationship, but can have technology backing that redefines how those parties are going to interact. That redefines how people are going to perceive insurance companies and how they are going to see their future interactions with them.
Yeah, and to add on to like Madeline and Chris, I think originally these consortiums of insurers that came together, InsureWave, B3I, Risk-Stream, I don't think necessarily the insurers wanted to work with one another, nor trust each other, right, necessarily. But due to expense ratios, as Madeline said, being so high, anywhere from 30 to 40%, it's how can they, increase their ROI and how can they do it? So coming together with, allowing technology to enable that kind of trust element, to bring encryption into it, where you could have an immutable record where anyone can see it on the entire network, really brought a vote of confidence. And I think that's really, technology has kind of enabled this trust and trustless ecosystems.
Great. And Ryan, whilst you're here, I want to take a question from the audience here, from Rachel Heroff, basically saying, do you think big insurance firms are really ready for solutions in blockchain tech? Love to get your views on that.
Yeah, it's been a journey,
Yes.
It's been a journey. It's a lot of these large enterprise companies are still kind of going through the cloud transformation. So, working with these architects to deploy nodes in the cloud or nodes on-prem, it's been getting through the chief information security offices. It's been an education process. It's been more on less on the tech side, more on the governance and standards and, to actually enable these large enterprise companies to move at a faster rate, So are they ready? They're getting ready. Let's put it that way.
I'll add some color to that, because it isn't just a cultural or leadership issue. I think that there are some aspects of insurance, because it is a regulated industry, that the big insurance companies have to be mindful of. And this whole idea around trusting the data and trusting in the cryptography of the data, and all these new ways of structuring how data flows and who can see it, I think aren't easy questions to answer when you're in a regulated environment. I think it's going to get there, absolutely, but it's going to be a slower journey because of it.
And if I can jump in there with an anecdote, we met a company recently who we'd been tracking for a little while, and they presented their pitch deck. And probably 2 years ago, when we met them, they had pitched themselves as a blockchain company, that they were using distributed ledger technology, yada yada yada. All the underlying technology they use is still the same. They've just taken all of that out of their deck. They're no longer marketing themselves as a DLT company, and they think that there is almost some element of fatigue among their clients, both in insurance and in some other industries like banking, about, there was a lot of hype about this a few years ago. They're still selling the same vision, which is, greater collaboration, both within the enterprise using blockchain, but across different enterprises. But I think they found that the term blockchain has become a bit of an albatross around their neck. So I think there's probably some people in big insurance firms who are saying they don't want to know at the moment.
Yeah. It is a little bit of a Marmite kind of situation. You either love it or hate it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who don't like it, and those who think they understand it actually have not much of an understanding of what blockchain actually is. But again, it's about having a business case that can be resolved by blockchain. You don't start with blockchain. You don't start with, I have the internet for you to resolve your issues. This is my problem. Let's see what is the right tool. But coming back to the trust element and whether or not, it has evolved, in this post or soon, hopefully post-pandemic area, is that during the lockdown, we've moved from physical interactions to digital one. I mean, especially in the Lloyd's market, it's very much about, this personal relationship you have on one-on-one. How has that impacted the insurance industry to build trust? And what tools have been used to breed trust? For example, are we using increasing amount of social media? Are we using wisdom of the crowd? What is your view on the kind of digital tools that are being used now to build trust?
Well, we see lots of social media presence and trying to position yourself as a company over social media and your social responsibility, you addressing the needs of the little man. But I think what is missing is not just talking about it, but also showing and giving the tech that is also proving that you really are doing something in that direction. So definitely right now we should stop just posting and telling what we want to change and start changing that from the company's perspective, from corporation's perspective.
Yeah. And I totally agree, and I'll add to that. And I've read so many articles that have said that the way that all industries, not just insurance, have responded to COVID-19 hasn't really been a technological issue, it's been a cultural issue. And just by force of having to work in different ways, people have been forced to find new ways of working. And for the most part, I think it's worked for most people. And of course, the coronavirus has had a horrible economic impact for many people personally and at a business level. But at the same time, I think for the most part, people have rallied, and I think the actual way to get work done hasn't been as impacted as what people thought it would have been pre-COVID-19.
I think from what we've seen, there's been a lot of talk in the industry, as Christoph says, about digital transformation for the last 3 years, and it's the industry's had that forced upon them as a result of COVID-19. And speaking from the experience of our portfolio companies, lots of them had been in conversations with insurers for 2 years or so about, using a new machine learning solution, buying cloud technology for the first time. And, in March, once they all had to work from home, those questions suddenly went away and it became a bit of a no-brainer. And so we saw a real acceleration in adoption as a result of this. And people were finally forced to put their money where their mouth is. It'll be interesting to see whether this is a one-off thing, and next year, this is kind of the beginning of a new era, or if they go back to dragging their feet in a year's time. But we will see.
Let's think about the consequences of this situation 20, 30 years ago without this technology we have today. We should embrace tech because it gives us tools to withstand problems like we're seeing nowadays. So blockchain is not maybe the answer to all the problems, but it can shift our interactions into a safer zone in situation like today.
Yeah. Ryan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. We've seen kind of COVID be almost a stimulant to a lot of these like companies wanting to like digitize all their workflows in a secure way, right? And how do you share data? And they have more data than they've ever had before. And how do you kind of organize it and connect these disparate parties together in a trusted way? And blockchain DLT, albeit I agree with like Jack, has been they want a solution. They don't really care what the underlying technology is at this point. It's like they just want solutions, and like how can like a lot of like the BAU has been affected by COVID, and it's like how can they take these pools of data and share them with disparate parties that are working from home. There's more data than ever before, and so it's like it's definitely a lot of these industries. And from my perspective, also it's like these industries are starting to converge, which is really interesting. Also, it's not just the insurers. It's like working with the large telcos that want to run these networks and 5G, and it's working with in supply chain and with InsureWave what they were doing. It's like you're starting to see all these kind of industries come together, which is really fascinating for me also.
So let me be a little bit controversial, because on this theme of digital transformation and trust, is saying it works quite well, is that what the pandemic has shown is that the insurance industry is competent at working from home, at using Zoom and using Teams. But in terms of digital transformation, there's been zero improvement. What do you guys think?
From my perspective, that looking at some of the consortium work that they're doing, like they're still in like the trough of deployment. Like they're still working, with all these like large, security aspects of different firms, cybersecurity, and pushing forward to get everything kind of launched and live. So it may have slowed it down just because, right now everyone's making sure that they can maintain their, business and not necessarily accelerate the transformation, but they're still focused on it. It's just been a slower pace. And like, I think in general, Zooms and WebExes and all these meetings are great, but in general, it slows down the pace because instead of being able to, have a water cooler conversation for 5 minutes, it's like you have to have a 15, 30-minute Zoom call, so
yes,
it just slows down the process.
And I think just from the projects I've been working on in the commercial space, I think those end buyers who are really driving the change, I think they're the ones who are going to really reap the benefits of things like moving towards real-time risk management and the real innovative products and services that they can demand and that can be utilized through emerging technology. So I think those who are on the front foot will definitely be reaping the rewards further down the track, and it's only good for the buyer of the product at the end of the day. The other thing I was going to say was somebody mentioned the business interruption high court case in the UK. The judgment came down today in favor of policyholders.
Yes.
So at least that's a good sense of where the courts are coming out in favor of the consumer.
Indeed.
And also maybe to go back to your example, Walid, Zoom is, again, this trust within the organization. If you're using online meetings, if you're working from home, but within the organization, it's very easy to maintain trust. But we are talking about a situation when you have to onboard onto this trust train people who are not part of your company, your organization. So that's where technology that we're discussing today can help us bring that to the masses, not just to confine to your IT infrastructure.
Indeed. So we got 6.5 minutes left before the end of the session. So you, the audience, if you've got any questions, follow Rachel's lead and ask a question in the chat box on the right. Ladies and gentlemen of the panel, for the last question I've got for you is, with the end of the pandemic, what do you expect to happen? Are we going to go back to the old ways? Are we going to continue adopting digital tools and see how we can build new digital processes with digital mindsets? Or do you believe it's going to be a bit of a hybrid of the both?
There's no going back to the old ways, not just because of the next pandemic that's going to come, but because people have just gotten accustomed to comfort of remote interactions, of trust, not just being enforced by physical presence, but also being able to do some government issues and solve government problems remotely just by mailing or sending documents online. So when we see that, we can finally become masters of our own time and not just try and fit into your government or your insurance company schedule. That opens a whole new chapter for us, a chapter where we can detach time and presence, physical presence, and yet retain that trust that we so long for.
I completely agree. There's absolutely no going back. And I think, even the insurance markets are realizing this. Lloyd's, for example, for any new entrants who want to come into Lloyd's and start their own syndicate and bring in underwriting capital into the market, you have to demonstrably show that you've got something accretive and innovative. Otherwise, you won't be given permission to come into the market and underwrite risk. So I think there's absolutely no going back.
Great. Ryan?
No, I was gonna say, I agree with, it's just, you've seen these like large ecosystems want to collaborate, want to share information, enabling technology. It's like you're starting to see these technologies converge also, which is really interesting. It's like, people are utilizing our platforms, like kind of like the fundamental block to have the data, but then applying AI and telematics to really create new products out of it, new revenue lines. So like usage-based insurance and other kind of new innovative models to really kind of create and generate new revenue lines.
Jack?
Yeah, I would agree. I think, to come back to something I said before, the insurance companies have adopted technology for the first time. There's a lot of anxiety about that kind of 0 to 1 moment where you decide, oh, we're going to go to the cloud. And once you've done it, each subsequent installation becomes a much easier decision. And so I think it could be a real opportunity for companies selling into the insurance industry.
Great. And
I think it's positive also, Wally, that, from my perspective, we haven't seen like the massive budget cuts and innovation yet in the large insurers. Like they still believe in it and they still want to drive it forward. They realize it's the way of the future in this digital world, this digital ecosystem that we're going to be in. So they're continuing to kind of invest in it and invest in insurtechs or invest in, internally also on different resources. So I think they're like, from an enterprise level, they still want to drive those kind of initiatives forward and continue to push in those paths.
Great. And Ryan, R3 works with, industries, outside of insurance, supply chain, banking and so on. And blockchain is often seen as this trust foundational layer. How have other industries performed in using blockchain as a trust facilitator that perhaps insurance could take a look at?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like one of the hottest topics in markets right now is central bank digital currencies. And it's like we see central banks from all over the world focusing on this and really digitizing assets, digitizing tokens to start exchanging value. And it's like you have regulators supporting it, you have the large central banks, you have the bank ecosystem all working together to do it and pushing it forward. So I say, like, in insurance, it's like coming together, bringing all the different players together, bringing the regulators together, because like, the worst case scenario is that you get an application, live and then a regulator comes down. So it's like really working with the local clients to kind of push this forward. Is that our bell? We're up?
No, that was my ping for pickup from school.
I thought I was talking too long.
For everyone on the call.
No worries. Well, Maddie, we're gonna close this up. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any final statements to make, or you, the audience, if you have any final questions that we can answer very quickly, please put it online, or else we're gonna move on to the next session, which is a deep dive with Rexio.